Just wondering if you guys have any recommendations for tracking infrastructure code version. So what I'm thinking is, for instance, you have an AWS tag that, of course, it's easy to create the first time that you create all your resources. You can say, you have a tag that's, the Git hash of your Git repo that has your infrastructure code. But the problem is that you want, when you later update your stack, you want the tags of only those resources that Terraform will be updating to be updated, right? So you don't want the resources that are not going to be touched to have their tags changed, right? So if
so you're talking about adding metadata in the form of tags to AWS resources, for example, and those tags would include perhaps the module that source and the module version?
Yeah, for example, it would be something like that. And, so that if I go to an RDS instance, I can look at the tag that's like,
I want to add this to the Cloud Posse modules. I see a nice way that we would do it for Cloud Posse through module introspection. We would do, the way we would implement it at Cloud Posse would be adding it to the null label module as a feature flag. And when you enable this feature flag, then it would look at the module version and automatically populate the tags based on looking at the module.sources. I forget exactly the JSON file, or sources.json, whatever. You can get the version of your module out of that file. So that's how we're looking at implementing it.
But wouldn't, and that wouldn't touch the resources that will not be updated? Like you don't want to force an update on all your resources just because of that.
No, but that's not fair. You have two ways of looking at this. And this is where it gets complicated. The resources are either tagged based on the nearest module or the top level module. So your choice is which one of those you want to implement. And both are easy, but you can't do something in between. You can't do like the middle module. But if it's the top, if you wanted to represent the module version of the top level module, it necessarily needs to change because it has changed. And if you wanted to represent the nearest module, like the local, because you can have modules calling modules calling modules. Do you want it to be the nearest module or the top level module, the farthest module?
Well, let's say that all I really want, in fact, is even maybe simpler than that. I just want the Git hash of the Git repo that contains the root module, right?
Right, but then when the root module changes, all of the other ones should change, no? Because the root changed.
Yeah, well, so what I mean is that, so let's say that, maybe I have 2 RDS instances and I do a Terraform apply and only one of the 2 is being updated. Well, I want that one to have the new hash of that commit that's causing that change, but I don't want the other RDS that isn't being changed.
The other one, but it wouldn't have it until you apply it, right? Because the metadata of the Git SHA should come from the Terraform code that's applying the tag. So you don't want an external service tagging it. You want the Terraform code actually adding the tag of the commit SHA itself.
Right.
Is that what you're thinking? And if you do that, well, it's only going to change when you run Terraform apply.
But then it seems to me like both my RDS instances will end up with that updated tag, which
no, because the tag is a property of the resource, and it only changes, the RDS resource only changes when you apply that root module. Another RDS database that happens to use the same resource won't be affected because it's technically a different instance of the resource. So yeah, I think
using the same value for the tag, it's going to change globally. How do you determine?
No, you're not supposed to be. You don't define. Well, no. You don't. First of all, you're not defining the value. You're reading the value from the file system, and that value is computed during plan time and added to the tag. And because it's added to the plan, the only way you affect infrastructure is by applying that plan file, right?
Yeah, but so I think I wouldn't want to just, so let's say that I have a tag in my provider, so that I can use the default tagging, mechanism that tags all my resources that are taggable. I have a tag in there called, code version. And I read that code. I set that code version from the, the Git clone, the Git commit. That won't work because that'll automatically update the tag for all the resources, not just the ones that Terraform thinks are being changed in this latest apply. Does that make sense?
What problem are you trying to solve with this?
Well, basically, I want to be able to look at a resource in AWS and see and look at that tag and say, okay, this tag, this resource, say one of the RDS instances, was last updated by the infrastructure code at git hash whatever, whereas this other RDS instance was last updated for the git code, git commit hash, so and so. So that I always know which version of the Git code was the cause of this current state of an existing resource.
I think you have to think of it as in terms of applying this one value to everything, because the actual code hasn't changed for that specific resource at that point. So the git hash single value will change everywhere. So you're right, but I think you need to accept that. And think about the fact that like you're going to get a version that you're going to have to track the change back from, but it will, like, the first time, do you know what I mean? Like, if that hasn't changed, the code that you're going to be looking at is the same in both. It just doesn't have the original apply tag.
Yeah, and I guess that's the challenge, right? It's because
if you're using spacelift as we are, it's a non-issue. Because the concept is you have a tracked commit. And a tracked commit is a concept with working within a monorepo where you trigger a commit to be tracked or to be run when files matching a certain pattern and a certain path change. So in this case, you have two different RDS databases. They are probably distinguished either by config files being modified or core Terraform files being modified. In either case, that would trigger a tracked commit, and that's the commit that it would be applied against. And when the Terraform plan runs, it's run against that specific commit within the repo. And through the introspection, when it reads the git commit value of the .git head file, or I forget what the file is in the Git directory, it would get the SHA of that particular commit that it's running, and that's the one that would be applied. Versus the other one would be run from a different commit at a different time and would read a different value of that commit file. So it's whatever value, when you run that plan, that's the value it's going to take. So control when you run the plans, you'll control when those SHAs change on your infrastructure.
And that's something that you guys obtain with spacelift, you're saying? That's
what we're doing with spacelift specifically, yeah. But I think it should be possible, like if you're using GitHub Actions with a monorepo pattern where certain paths trigger, I think it should be also feasible in that situation. Because the key is, what you're saying is you don't want to run a plan for every commit. But because if you did run a plan for every commit, it would always be changing because your head is always changing. But logically speaking, based on that pull request that RDS database didn't change because that path wasn't modified. So you want to make sure that you're planning only when paths are changing.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I would be running Terraform apply every time there's a commit, but the resources that are not in the plan should not get the new tag.
But they shouldn't be in the same state file, therefore. They should be decoupled in terms of state. So if you're doing a Terralift, that's your problem.
I mean, I may have a change that maybe adds a parameter group, changes a parameter parameter.
That should
and it
change
affects
the
only one parameter group, right?
No, so this is where I professionally disagree on the approach that if you are adding resources to a root module, that effectively changes the version of the entire module and every resource deployed. If you don't want that, they should be decoupled in terms of top level state and different Terraform root modules, what Cloud Posse calls components. So it's a trade-off. Yeah. So I don't see any way of handling it. Now I understand the rub here is that we're thinking about it in a single state and only modifying the resources in that state when they are changed as a result of some difference in the graph. But that's not going to happen.
I think for me it goes further than that, because it's even if I had a 5 different states that track different aspects of the infrastructure, I would want each one of these states to be able to tell me when when a particular resource was updated, from what Git hash it was updated.
It's going to require changes to Terraform core or not using.
Yeah, it might. Yeah, that's why I was curious to ask the question, because I haven't found that. I mean, there are ways to do it. I've seen ways where you can, for instance, you can instrument Terraform code to ignore a tag update, right? So you can I don't know what it's called now. It's like ignore
lifecycle rules.
Yeah, exactly. Lifecycle rule, and that works. The problem is that there's
you'll only
no
get the
way
first one then.
Yeah, well, even the first one I think is okay because it doesn't already exist. But the problem is that you have to manually do that to each of your resources, which of course is error prone, right? It's not like, that's why they came up with the concept of defining your default tags in your provider, in your AWS provider, because automatically every tag on the resource gets them. Managing, making sure that all your resources are tagged was just super error prone, right? It's the same problem here, is that there is actually a way, but it's requires a lot of discipline to make it happen.
I don't see any practical way of making it happen with turnkey Terraform.
I did something along these lines. Just briefly, I'll lay out what I did was I wanted to have, I deploy pretty much an entire environment with one state directory. We're talking about pulling out some pieces, but this is actually working just fine. So this one version, one Git hash or whatever, is all I really need. So I wrote a no resource that will do a git describe, which is a nice, it gives it the last tag and how many commits since then. Or if they're in the source, if there's an actual module version of the specific module, I'll just, as you said, Eric, introspect. It's .terraform modules.json, and you just use your module as the key there. And then once you get those values, I just stick them in SSM, just like as a base reference.
So Michael Jenkins posted a link, and let's treat it as a thought experiment. So like, what if one took a slightly different approach where you had like a GitHub action that ran, and it actually could modify the tag property of every taggable resource with the last known commit SHA or something. But what's ironic about that is just adding the tag itself is changing the commit. And it's a little bit of a head spin.
No, exactly. I don't think that works.
It seems like a really convoluted and complex way of doing an audit trail for Terraform.
So, I kind of.
It's a valid use case. I'm not denying that. It's a very valid use case. I'm not denying that, but it feels like you're overcomplicating and trying to fight the language a bit too much.
Yeah.
It's not going to be
it's starting with a very simple question, and the answer seems to be, well, there's nothing in Terraform that allows you to
with that precision.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think therefore just change the requirements.
Yeah.
I think the requirement is when the root module changes, this is the commit SHA when the root module changed, and then that at least helps you narrow down the window. Maybe, I don't know.
No, that's better than nothing for sure. But what'll happen then, of course, is that every commit will end up with a plan that affects all your resources, and and 90% of those resources might have just a tag change, right?
Could be, but in our case, that would never happen. At least for how we think about infrastructure and how we break up our state, it would basically never happen unless something actually modified those files. That would trigger a plan, and then that would trigger the tags to change. Well, assuming that plan, yeah, so if that plan ran, if one of those files changed and the plan ran, I guess it would rerun introspection. It would get a new SHA. It would want to modify the tags, even if it was a no-op change to infrastructure. So you're right. That's an interesting consideration I didn't think about. So my point here is like, you can change some Terraform code, like add a line of white space. That has no material effect on your resources, right? But if we were doing this introspection I'm talking about, where it would read then either the git commit or from module sources or something, it would conceivably then get a new commit and then cause a new tag on everything, even though nothing actually changed other than white space. So I think it's a wart I would accept in order to have the traceability.